Are negative Google reviews hurting your business? Don't let unfair feedback cost you customers. At Webamax, we specialize in removing false, misleading, and damaging reviews so your online reputation stays strong. Our expert team works quickly and legally to clean up your digital presence, helping you rebuild trust. Visit us on the web at www.gowebamax.com. That's GOWEBIMAX.com, or text us for a free quote at 856-840-8343. Don't let bad reviews define you. Get immediate help from Webamax.
Hi, everyone, and welcome on in to another edition of Eye on the Enemy, powered by the Fans First Sports Network. I am John Stolnis. I write for BleedingGreenNation.com, and this is part of the Eagles Pin Pull Network. You can follow me on X and Blue Sky at John Stolnis. Super Bowl week is here. Super Bowl 59 just hours away. Many hours, depending on when you're listening to this, but still hours away. I mean, I guess everything in life is hours away. Just depends on the amount of hours that we're talking about. But the Eagles getting ready to take on the Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl 59 Sunday evening. Rematch, revenge game, history, however you want to frame this Super Bowl, it is going to be a ridiculously good game on Sunday night. I'm going to talk with Stephen Serda. He is a Chiefs podcaster here at the Fans First Sports Network, and we're going to get his thoughts on what the Chiefs are going to do. How is Patrick Mahomes going to go after Vic Fangio's number one rated defense in the NFL? And how are the Eagles? How is Kellen Moore and Nick Sirianni? How is Saquon Barkley going to get his against the best defensive coordinator the playoffs have ever seen in Steve Spagnuolo? Lots of brains going up against each other here this Sunday evening in New Orleans as the Eagles look to get a little bit of New Orleans revenge. Super Bowl 15, you'll remember, the Eagles lost to the Raiders 27-10. That game held in New Orleans, so the Eagles looking to win their second Super Bowl title in the place where they lost their first one back in 1981. Lots to get to here on this edition of the podcast. I'm going to go over just a couple of the matchups that I think are really important to watch out for in this game, and then we'll go to Stephen and get his thoughts in just a second. Also, I did mention that the Chiefs have an opportunity here to three-peat. I'm going to run down the 8 teams that have tried to pull this off and haven't been able to get the job done. And a quick mention about Eric Allen at the end of the podcast as well. But as we go into this game, one of the things that really stands out in terms of what the Chiefs like to do and what the Eagles like to do, and I'm not the first person to mention this, so don't think this is necessarily original content, but the Chiefs don't have a passing game that's going to try and beat you deep, right? They want to dink and dunk. If you watched any of these Chiefs playoff games, every pass is 6-7 yards, and then expecting receivers to kind of make some yards after the catch. It's really what the Eagles... That's all they allowed to Washington last week. That's really all they let Jaden Daniels do, was make those quick-hitting throws. He wanted to go down the field. But these cornerbacks are so good. Darius Slay and Quinyon Mitchell are so good, they just don't allow it. But the Chiefs' offense doesn't really function that way. They try to create separation in the middle of the field, within 10 yards, so that Patrick Mahomes can hit his 6-yard pass, his 8-yard pass, his 7-yard pass. They don't run the ball very much. They're not really a threat to run the ball all that much. But the idea is for Patrick Mahomes to get that ball out of his hands as quickly as possible. He can burn you on a scramble, too. On a 3rd and 8, he can run for 9 or 10 yards. So you've got to have some kind of pass rush discipline. You've got to have eyes on Patrick Mahomes. But one of the big keys in this game is going to be how he attacks the slot, and how Cooper DeJean is able to match up, whether it's against Travis Kelce or, whether it's against whatever wide receiver happens to be playing in the slot in that particular moment. They really like to utilize those players. 2 years ago, we saw that a lot of these slot guys, they used motion in the backfield to confuse the Eagles defense. I think this Eagles defense this time around won't be as confused as Jonathan Gannon's defense was. Vic Fangio has these guys playing at a really high level. I was reading this on Pro Football Focus. PFF's website says this season players lined up in the slot have recorded a 45.2 coverage grade against the Chiefs. Only the Lions have forced opposing slot defenders into a lower coverage grade this season. In other words, the Chiefs do this really, really well. Cooper DeJean is going to be the guy who has to try and stop these Chiefs wide receivers from converting those important 3rd and 4th downs, and that's really where this game is going to be won. Okay, it's going to be won on 3rd and 4th down, and it's going to be won in the turnover battle. The Eagles like to get teams into third and fourth downs to say, hey, listen, you might convert 2 or 3 of these on a drive. Can you convert 4? Can you convert 5? We saw that with the Commanders last week. They forced the Commanders to convert 2 fourth downs on that first drive, to the point then where they decided after converting 2 fourth downs, they didn't want to try a third one and instead kicked the field goal. And it was a long drive, but the Eagles walked out of that having only given up a field goal. That was a victory for Vic Fangio. That allowed him to see, what are the Commanders trying to do? What is Jayden Daniels trying to do? And in watching and allowing them to kind of punch themselves out a little bit on that long first drive, he only gave up the 3 points. The Eagles got 7 right back, and now the Commanders are having to work for everything. That's kind of how the Chiefs want to play. And a lot of that comes into using the slot receivers, using Travis Kelce to convert those third downs, convert those fourth downs. At a certain point, if you're holding the Chiefs out of the end zone, if you're making them kick field goals instead of touchdowns, you're going to win this game. And a lot of that is going to come on the shoulders of Cooper DeJean in this game. Obviously, Saquon Barkley and what he can do against this Kansas City run defense that has yet to give up a 100-yard rusher this year. Saquon's going to get 100 yards. I just can't believe that he won't give up 100 yards in this game. But I think the big matchup to watch in this one is, how involved is A.J. Brown going to be on Trent McDuffie? In Super Bowl 57, A.J. Brown had a big day. He had that big touchdown catch, that long touchdown catch in the second quarter of that game that gave the Eagles the lead. We saw that in the game against the Commanders. Brown broke out of his postseason slump. He hadn't done much against the Packers, hadn't done much against the Rams, had a very good game against the Commanders. Clearly, they were trying to target him a little bit more. And I really liked how the Eagles did open up the passing game a little bit against the Commanders. I'm very curious to see what kind of wrinkles Kellen Moore has up his sleeve. Will there be any wrinkles to kind of open things up for A.J. Brown against Trent McDuffie in this game? McDuffie has not been able to cover big receivers really well, but he is an exceedingly good player. The only cornerback in the NFL to be a plus grader in run defense, pass rushing, and in coverage. Another big matchup is going to be, how does Zach Bond match up against Travis Kelce? I don't think Bond's going to be matched up one-on-one against him. Again, I think Cooper DeJean is going to have a big part of that. But Bond has done a good job covering tight ends this year. Bond's going to have to play like a first-team All-Pro linebacker. I think he can absolutely do that. So in Super Bowl 59 here, and then one of the other ones to watch out for, I think, and this is going to be a fascinating one: Lane Johnson against George Karlaftis. George Karlaftis is a phenomenal edge rusher, but we have seen Lane Johnson do a job on guys like Karlaftis. We've seen him do a job on Nick Bosa back against San Francisco in the NFC Championship game 2 years ago. Lane Johnson shuts everybody down. Lane Johnson shut Karlaftis down in Super Bowl 57. Karlaftis had 2 pressures against Lane Johnson in Week 11, but that was it. So this is a matchup I think the Eagles should win. Really, they should win the whole offensive line matchup. I know Chris Jones is an animal, but Landon Dickerson appears to be healthy. And Chris Jones beats a lot of folks. Landon Dickerson isn't perfect, but he is phenomenal. And so I think that's going to be another big matchup to watch in this game, is how they handle Chris Jones and how Jalen Carter and Milton Williams handle the middle of the Chiefs' offensive line, which is one of their weaknesses. Center Creed Humphrey is the guy to watch here in this game with that matchup. I mean, that's going to be it could be. I know hearing a lot of people pick breakout candidates, and Milton Williams is the guy you hear most often mentioned, simply because with Milton Williams, he's not going to get the double teams that Jalen Carter is going to get. So those are some real quick hitting matchups to watch in this game. I know, you've been listening to content all week. You probably don't need me reiterating all of the different matchups there are to watch here in this game on Sunday night. Now, let me give you an update on a little bit of news that I think has had people worried as the week has gone on, and that was some illnesses going around the Eagles locker room. Some players have been missing practice this week. Jalen Carter, the biggest name probably, was missing practice and media availability, or was a limited participant in practice at the beginning of the week because of an illness. We don't know exactly what that illness was. Quinyon Mitchell said that he has laryngitis. That's not awesome, but hopefully he'll be ready to go. And Jalen Carter has been out with an illness. That, of course, would be a huge loss, but it sounds, Derek Gunn's reporting is that none of the Eagles who are sick, they're all getting better. They all appear to be on the way up and almost done with their illnesses. And Jalen Carter was a full participant at practice on Thursday. So that is great news for his availability to play in Super Bowl 59 and to be 100% effective. So that's good news. It sounds like the illness that has been going around the Eagles locker room is dissipating somewhat, and that these two teams and the Eagles will be fully healthy. These two teams actually will be very healthy heading into Super Bowl 59. Now, there's a couple pieces of history that are on the line here in Super Bowl 59. The first, and it involves Jalen Hurts. No quarterback has ever lost a Super Bowl and then gone back to the Super Bowl and won it. No quarterback has ever done what Jalen Hurts is trying to do. There have been a number of quarterbacks who've lost that first Super Bowl, been back to the big game, and then lost it again. Obviously, Jim Kelly is a guy that we think of, losing 4 Super Bowls in a row. But obviously, there's some of those early Vikings teams. Fran Tarkenton was a guy who lost a bunch of Super Bowls early and never able to get over the hump. There are others who were never able to scale that mountain after losing the first Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts is trying to become the first player to do that. The Chiefs, of course, are trying to become the first team ever to win 3 straight Super Bowls. 8 teams have tried to pull off the three-peat, and all of them have failed. Green Bay actually did win 3 championships in a row. They won the very last NFL championship in 1965, and then they played the Super Bowl in 1966 and 1967, winning Super Bowls 1 and 2. They did not reach Super Bowl 3, of course, in 1968 because Vince Lombardi retired. Bart Starr got hurt that year, and they had their first losing season in 11 seasons. So Green Bay, they did win 3 championships in a row, but did not win 3 Super Bowls in a row in the 1960s, the late 1960s. Now, the Miami Dolphins, winners of Super Bowls in 1972 and 73. Of course, 1972, that historic undefeated season. They also won it in 1973, and they were good again in 1974. They went 11-3 and won their division. But in the divisional round, they fell to John Madden's Oakland Raiders, who were 12-2 going into that game in the historic Sea of Hands game. It was an amazing final touchdown by Oakland. They scored this touchdown just in a pass that was just thrown into traffic in the end zone, and somehow they came down with the ball and won the game. It's called the Sea of Hands game. Pretty fun game to go back and watch. And the Dolphins were denied an opportunity to win their 3rd straight Super Bowl. It was actually the first time they didn't play in the AFC Championship game since 1970. Next, the Pittsburgh Steelers. This actually 2 instances in which the Steel Curtain Steelers failed to win 3 straight Super Bowls. They won Super Bowls in 1974 and 75, and then they advanced to the AFC Championship game in 1976, but did so without Franco Harris and Rocky Bleier. The Raiders, once again, denying a team a chance to win 3 straight Super Bowls. They beat the Steelers in the AFC Championship game in 1976. Pittsburgh falling just 1 game short of getting back to the Super Bowl for another shot at it. Now, Pittsburgh won Super Bowls in 1978 and 79, of course, but then in 1980, the end of the Steel Curtain Terry Bradshaw era was upon us. The defense went from being an elite unit to a pretty mediocre unit in 1980. Terry Bradshaw threw 22 interceptions that year. They did go 9-7, but missed the playoffs for the first time in 9 seasons. Then you've got the San Francisco 49ers, the Joe Montana 49ers of 1988 and 89. They won those 2 Super Bowls, that heart-stopping game against the Bengals and Boomer Esiason in 88, and then when they destroyed the Broncos 55-10 in the 1989 Super Bowl, the 49ers looked like they were ready to do it again in 1990. They went 14-2, steamrolled their way to the NFC Championship game. They were big favorites over the Jeff Hostetler-led New York Giants in that game, but the Giants' defense came to play. Joe Montana, really his career in San Francisco ended in this game. You had Steve Young as the backup who was really ready to be a starter, and Joe Montana got destroyed on a hit from behind by Leonard Marshall, a big fumble in that game. It really did just finish Joe Montana's career in San Francisco. The Giants kicked a game-winning field goal as time expired to win 15-13. The Giants won with 5 field goals in that game, ending the 49ers' chances of a three-peat. Then you had the Dallas Cowboys, won the Super Bowl in 1992 and 1993. Of course, after that 93 Super Bowl, the Cowboys shot themselves in the foot by firing Jimmy Johnson as head coach. Barry Switzer takes over. The Cowboys still got to the NFC Championship game, but here you had Steve Young and his redemption tour in 1993. He beats the Cowboys in the NFC Championship game, and the 49ers win the Super Bowl in 1994. Of course, we remember that season as Eagles fans. That was the year the Eagles went into San Francisco and beat the 49ers 40-8. But the 49ers obviously recovered, and Steve Young ends up winning the AFC Championship game. They had fallen to the Cowboys in the 93, and I think the 92 NFC Championship game as well. They finally get over the hump, and they beat the Dallas Cowboys and destroy their hopes of winning a third title. Of course, the Cowboys would win the Super Bowl in 95, so they won 3 in 4 seasons. And you had the Denver Broncos, winners of Super Bowls in 1997 and 1998. This was a John Elway redemption tour also, but Terrell Davis was really the key to the 49ers winning, the Broncos winning in 1998. And John Elway retired after the 98 season. Brian Griese takes over, and you just knew that they weren't winning a third straight Super Bowl after that. Terrell Davis gets injured early in the season, tears his ACL in weeks 4. The Broncos fell apart, ending their hopes of a three-peat. And then finally, you had the New England Patriots, winners of Super Bowls in 2003 against the Panthers and 2004 against the Eagles. In 2005, they had to undergo a lot of changes on the defensive side of the ball. They suffered a lot of injuries that season. Teddy Bruschi suffered a stroke that almost ended his career. The Patriots still won the AFC East, but they lost in the divisional round to the Denver Broncos in Denver, Jake Plummer's Broncos. In Denver, the Patriots fell, and they missed out on an opportunity to win 3 straight Super Bowls. Now, none of those 8 previous teams made it all the way to the Super Bowl for their third shot at a title. Patrick Mahomes and these Kansas City Chiefs have a shot to do that here on Sunday night, unlike the 8 teams that went before them. On helping me to break this game down is Stephen Serda. He is the executive producer and host of Foolish Club Media, which is they cover the Chiefs for the Fan First Sports Network. Going to join me to help break down the key storylines and matchups here in this Super Bowl 59 between the Birds and the Chiefs. Stephen, welcome to Eye on the Enemy. How are you?
Hey, John. Happy to be here. Excited about the Super Bowl, and hopefully the Chiefs make history. I know you're on the other side of this, but I hope at the very least we get a good game on Sunday.
You know, just a minute ago, I ran down a list of the 8 teams before the Chiefs that have had an opportunity to win 3 Super Bowls in a row and never done it. I mean, some of the legendary teams, the Steel Curtain Steelers. You had the Aikman, Irvin, Troy, Emmitt Smith Cowboys of the early 1990s, which is the Patriots. You know, the Chiefs have a chance to do something none of those legendary teams littered with Hall of Famers have ever done before. How are you feeling about that opportunity? I mean, how likely do you think this is that they are going to make history here on Sunday night?
I feel pretty good. I think the biggest hurdle for the Chiefs this season was overcoming injuries, and like some of those teams that you mentioned, that was the biggest thing that they faced. Because when you play this much football, when you have this much success in the postseason, guys tend to break down. It's really hard to stay healthy, and the Chiefs had a ton of injuries this season, but somehow overcame all of that, and this is the healthiest that they've been all season at the perfect time. So I'm feeling pretty good, honestly, about their chances on Sunday.
Yeah, and having Patrick Mahomes makes you feel pretty confident no matter what that you can make history. He's a history-making quarterback. But as an Eagles fan, we've been watching this team just dominate really since the bye week after week 4. And here in the playoffs, with each passing week, especially in the NFC Championship game, the Eagles just seem to be playing better football with each passing week. So I guess, you know, how nervous are Chiefs fans of the Eagles? How scared is there a level of fear of the Eagles right now? How scared are they of the Eagles, if at all?
I don't think they're scared of the Eagles, but I do think there is like respect. Like, I think everyone understands just how talented this Eagles team is and how stacked they are across the board. Like, I think the Chiefs have somehow been underestimated this season, and some of that is, you know, playing down the competition, playing in these tight contests all year long. But if you had to pick one roster, I think similar to last year's Super Bowl, it was like if you had to pick one team that was more talented than the Chiefs, it was like the 49ers. And I think the Eagles are kind of that team this season where it was like, for some reason, all year long in the NFC, it was like, oh, Sam Darnold and the Vikings are a great story.
Right.
The Detroit Lions are coming for the crown finally. And everybody was kind of overlooking the Eagles. And I was sitting back saying, like, I don't know, man. The Eagles' defense is really good now. Like, that secondary is really good. This roster is really, really talented. I don't think we should discredit what the Eagles are doing. And so I don't think Chiefs fans are necessarily scared of the Eagles, but I think that they do respect how talented this team is and how deserving they are of being in another Super Bowl.
So when you look back to 2 years ago, it's kind of a two-part thing here. Are the Eagles a more talented team right now than they were 2 years ago? And then conversely, are the Chiefs a more talented team now than they were 2 years ago? How do you assess where both teams are now compared to 2 years ago?
I think the Eagles overall are probably a more talented team than they were 2 years ago. The edge rushers, I don't think are quite as talented. Like, that team stacked up 70 sacks and they were insane coming off of the edge. But some of that now is mitigated by the fact that Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and the interior of that defensive line is so loaded with talent as opposed to the outside guys. But I think without a doubt, this is a more talented Chiefs team than the one that won it 2 years ago. And that's something that they've done a really good job of drafting and developing players. And I know this season, like, the expectations were high for the offense, and Rashee Rice goes down. Hollywood Brown's injured most of the season, but they finally got those guys healthy, and Xavier Worthy has been tremendous over the last 8 weeks of the season, and they finally figured out how to utilize him. And the Chiefs' offensive line has some problems, but overall, I think, top to bottom in all three phases of football, I think this team is more talented than the one that won the Super Bowl against the Eagles 2 years ago.
All right, so you're the Chiefs defense, and you're looking at Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, the talent that is on the offensive side of the ball. And how do you attack, or how do you prepare for an Eagles team that really is different than a lot of other teams around the NFL, or they will just pound you running the football? And I know the Chiefs have done a good job not allowing a 100-yard rusher all season. Saquon Barkley seems to run for 100 yards falling out of bed in the morning. So it's kind of, I think Eagles fans are anticipating another big game from Saquon Barkley at this point. But how do you anticipate the Chiefs matching up against this Eagles offense? What are they going to do to try and slow down Saquon Barkley? Is it simply force Jalen Hurts to do what he did 2 years ago in the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that. I think Eagles fans would say, how do you try to slow down this offense? And they're like, well, force them to throw and force, because the Eagles are an offense that, seemingly they don't want to operate in a world where Jalen Hurts has to throw 35 times or something like that. They just want to run the football. And I think you go into this game, if you're the Chiefs defense and Steve Spagnuolo, saying hey, we can live with Saquon Barkley having 110 yards and a touchdown. What we can't live with is him having 190 yards in 2 touchdowns. And it's you just can't give up the explosive plays, because similar to the NFC Championship game, what really broke the Commanders in the second half was Saquon just ripping off these huge touchdown runs. And I think the Chiefs' run defense is good. It's been worse lately in the postseason, but I also think that's kind of a product of matchups where Steve Spagnuolo is going to go out of his way to try to be okay, well, we can live with Joe Mixon rushing for 80-plus yards against us. We can live with James Cook killing us in the AFC Championship game, but we can't live with Josh Allen torching us on the ground. We can't live with Nico Collins torching us through the air. And so I think the Chiefs' whole game plan is going to be just minimize the explosive runs by Saquon Barkley and then see what the secondary can do against guys like A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert.
How do you do that, though? How do you limit the explosive runs from Saquon Barkley? Because many teams, I'm sure, have come into their games against the Eagles in the playoffs with the intention of doing just that and haven't been able to get it done.
Yeah, so an underrated player for the Chiefs that I don't think gets talked about enough, and really in the playoffs he hasn't been playing a ton, but he was really active in the regular season, is linebacker Leo Chenal. He is one of the Chiefs' absolute best run stuffers, but what a lot of teams do is when they're rolling out 3 wide receiver sets, they take Leo off the field because Leo's terrible in coverage. Like, he's a liability as a coverage linebacker, but he's incredible around the line of scrimmage, incredible at stopping the run. And when the Chiefs' run defense was the best this season, it was because he was super active in their defense and they were utilizing him a lot. And so I would think the Chiefs are going to try to find ways to get him onto the field, but the Eagles love running 3 wide receiver sets, so it's going to be difficult. So really, at the end of the day, it's going to be on the Chiefs linebackers like Nick Bolton, Drew Tranquil, Tramari Connor's like their nickel back, but he's really more of a safety, kind of playing out of position, who's really good at the line of scrimmage, but again, struggles a lot in coverage. And so I just think they're going to try to stack the box and try to, like, hey, we can live with Saquon rushing for 5 to 8 yards. We just can't give up 40 yards. And I think that's going to be the whole game plan. It's like, let him chip away. If he averages 5 yards per carry, whatever. We just can't have him ripping off these 70-yard touchdowns at any point.
The passing game for the Eagles has been a little bit up and down this year, but we've seen that when the running game does get stuffed a little bit, Hurts has had some good games throwing the football, especially against the Commanders last week, against the Steelers, when everybody was talking about how the Eagles can't pass the football. They can't pass the football. They just made it a point that week to come out and say, we're going to throw the football, and A.J. Brown had a big day. Devontae Smith had a big day. So it's kind of an interesting situation. You've got Smith, you've got Brown, you've got Dallas Goedert, and you've got in Jalen Hurts, a guy who can throw the football. They just haven't done it a whole lot this year. Is that how well are the Chiefs set up to stop the Eagles' passing game? I know they've got a very good secondary, very good tackling.
Yeah. So I think they're kind of built for this matchup, but it's also like it's kind of dependent on Jalen Watson and how much they utilize him. Jalen Watson is the Chiefs' number 2 corner. Like, Trent McDuffie's the all-pro, like, superstar player, but Jalen Watson's an underrated player who's, former 7th-round pick who has really carved out a significant role for himself, has turned into a really good player. And he was hurt mid-season, and prior to the Jalen Watson injury, the Chiefs secondary was like one of the best secondaries in football. He goes down, and they totally tanked down the back half of the season. Now, they got Jalen Watson back just before the playoffs, thankfully, but he's been on a snap count. And they're saying that he's trending in the right direction to play, like, to be full go ahead of the Super Bowl, which would be the first time since, like, week 9 that he's had a full allotment of snaps. And without Jalen Watson playing a full allotment of snaps, the Chiefs' other corners are a problem. So I think it's Jalen Watson is a guy that has good size and good length, like matches up a lot better with A.J. Brown than even Trent McDuffie does. And Trent McDuffie, I think, is one of the best defensive players in football. Like we saw in the last Super Bowl where A.J. Brown torched him for a touchdown, he struggles against big, strong wide receivers, and that's always been his issue. He struggles against Cortland Sutton every single season. And so it's just a bad matchup for him, but Jalen Watson, I think, matches up better physically with him, and then that gives you the ability to move Trent McDuffie around because they like moving him to the slot, outside, or whatever, and so he can move around a little bit more with Devontae Smith. I think that's a better matchup for him physically. So I think it really has to do with those two players, and then everybody else, it's just, hope they can contain and hope they don't give up explosive plays. But I would expect Jalen Hurts, even though this season was a little bit down with him as a passer, like I would totally expect him to show up like he did and the last time they played in the Super Bowl and put it all together. So yeah, I just expect that we're going to see some points in this one, and it's going to be another really good contest between really good teams.
Well, if the goal of the Chiefs defense is to stop Saquon Barkley, obviously the goal of the Eagles defense is to stop Patrick Mahomes. And when you look at how the Chiefs move the football, how they like to score, it's a lot of short passing game. It's not a lot of, send the ball deep down the field. It's matriculating the ball through like 8, 9, 10 play drives in order to get it down there, which coincidentally is exactly the way the Eagles defense likes to force teams to play. They're willing to give you some of the short stuff, make you convert third downs, make you convert fourth downs, because if there's a third down you don't convert, you're kicking a field goal instead of scoring 6 points. And that's kind of how the Eagles defense has gotten started the last few weeks when they've really been playing well. They might give up a couple of field goals early and then they kind of lock it down. So if you're the Chiefs offense and you're Patrick Mahomes, you've got some offensive players to work with there, but it's a lot of short passing game and stuff that kind of feeds into what the Eagles like to do. So how is it that the Chiefs are able to seemingly score just enough every week in order to win these one possession games that they're so good at winning?
They just make the plays when they have to. Like when their back is against the wall, they just find a way to get it done. And I was actually talking to a friend earlier this week, and we were kind of talking about how both of these teams like want to go on these long, drawn out scoring drives and control the clock and control possessions. And it's like, I wouldn't be shocked if there's like the least amount of offensive possessions in a Super Bowl in this game, because both of these teams are going on these long, drawn out scoring drives. But that is exactly the Chiefs offense now. It's Mahomes is hyper efficient. They're going to attack you in the short and intermediate stuff. They'll occasionally take a shot down the field, but they're not very good at it, and they haven't found a lot of success doing that this season. So they want to operate in the efficiency game. They want to run the ball a little bit. They want to use RPOs and do everything around the line of scrimmage and then try to create after the catch. Like, that is their whole offense now. And to their credit, down the back half of the season, they've gotten really good at it. Like, they're really efficient at it now, and they just don't turn the football over. And that's been the biggest thing, is early in the season, they were turning the football over like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't done that down the back half of the season, and now it's kind of turned into this well-oiled offensive machine again, where it's not the most exciting thing to watch, but they find a way, like you mentioned, to score just enough points every week.
Does that make you nervous at all, the fact that they don't blow teams out, that they do just kind of win a lot of these one-score games, that it seems as though every one of these games is coming down to the final drive, especially in the playoffs? Is there a worry that magic runs out at some point, maybe hopefully on Sunday?
Of course it's worrisome, John.
I'm sure. Right.
I've been living like this for 2 years now
right.
with this team. It's every game. Like,
yeah.
They don't blow anyone out. They just... And it's really like, it's how they like to operate. Like, they just know that they're so talented, and Mahomes will make the plays when they have to, or the defense will come up with a blocked field goal or a sack or do something crazy. Like, they're just so talented that they know that they will make the plays when they absolutely have to. And so they're totally fine operating in this world where they're up 3 points in the fourth quarter or need to go on a drive with 2 minutes to go in the game and go get a field goal or go get a touchdown or something to win. Like, they're perfectly fine operating in that world. But yes, I would love a blowout where I'm not pulling my hair out and ready to have a heart attack before the end of the game. It's just what we're used to now as Chiefs fans. It's just how we have to live, because that's how this team insists on playing games.
Talk a little bit about Xavier Worthy, because we've heard a lot about him. He's obviously had a couple of good games here in the playoffs. It seems every postseason there's an X factor that emerges for the Chiefs. Isaiah Pacheco, I think, was one of them a couple of years ago. Every year somebody else pops up out of the woodwork. You've got Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes, and then every year it's a different group, right? It's named Mecole Hardman, or it's Scantling. It's just somebody else every year.
Yeah, and Worthy, like, without Worthy's rise over the back half of the season, I don't think the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl right now. Like, that's how instrumental he has been to the offense, because Rashee Rice started the year looking like he was going to be an all-pro caliber wide receiver this season, and he had a strong chance to lead the NFL in receptions, and then he goes down in week 3 and is out for the season. And their wide receiver room was terrible for most of the season. Like, they trade for Hopkins, but Hopkins can still make a play here and there, but Hopkins is kind of a shell of himself. And then they get Hollywood Brown back, but they got him back week 17. Like, he wasn't a part of the regular season. And Worthy has had this rise specifically because early in the season, they were basically just like, hey, you're really fast, just run straight down the field, and we'll try to take a few shots to you a game. And they couldn't connect on those at all. And not to say that he wasn't getting open, because he was. Mahomes was just missing him most of the time. But really, where they found success with him in this hyper-efficient, long, drawn-out scoring drive offense is basically they just put him in the Rashee Rice role. Like, after week 11, they were just like, we're going to start deploying you in the short area, and we're just going to try to set things up to get you in space and utilize that speed. And so it's like, we'd rather you get 15 yards instead of getting 50, which is all they were trying to do with him early in the season. And that's really how he's become such a significant part of the offense now. Like, Xavier Worthy is a talented player, and I'm excited to see where he can go moving forward. But really, he didn't start to excel until they started just being like, okay, we should get him the ball quick, and we should get him the ball around the line of scrimmage and let him utilize that speed, instead of just having him run straight down the field and taking deep shots to him, because they couldn't figure out how to utilize that. That's been the biggest difference maker, is that, like, he is so explosive, and it's not... It's the Chiefs committing to, we're fine with him getting first downs. We don't need him to get long touchdowns.
So you look at the secondary, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean were obviously Defensive Rookie of the Year candidates, second, third team All-Pros, I believe, for those guys. Darius Slay still playing at a high level. You have Zach Bond, first team All-Pro linebacker. We haven't seen one of those in Philadelphia in generations. So, I mean, that's been an amazing thing to watch happen. And you mentioned that Jalen Carter, Milton Williams, the middle of that defensive line, they've really come alive. They don't have the speed off the edge like they did a couple of years ago. But Nolan Smith has really emerged here in the playoffs and has become kind of a force on the edge, and Brandon Graham's coming back. So you've got a defense here that I think is a more complete defense than the one 2 years ago, which I'm curious, like, how do you attack if you're the Chiefs, if you're Andy Reid? Where on this defense are you attacking? What are you looking for? Because you've obviously got to account for Jalen Carter and Milton Williams in the middle of that defensive line. That feels to me like a big matchup advantage for Kansas City. I imagine the idea is going to be to get the ball out fast, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And really, so against the Houston Texans, like, one of the big storylines going in that game was, the Texans pass rush and those edge rushers, but it was also they're two corners that are really good at creating turnovers, and they're dynamic, and they get interceptions, and they turn those into pick sixes. And so the Chiefs' whole game plan was just, we're not even going to use the wide receivers. Like, we're just not even going to attack those outside corners because we think we can win without having to do that. I certainly don't think they're going to do that against the Eagles, but I would try to avoid testing those talented cornerbacks, and I would instead try to attack the middle of the field and try to exploit where I think the matchup advantage is, and that's against the Eagles, like, coverage linebackers. Because I think one of the most underrated things about this game that I feel like enough people haven't been giving credit to is the Eagles' loss of Nakobe Dean, who Nakobe Dean was, finally healthy after this is his third season after being hurt, basically his first and second year in the NFL,
and playing great.
And was enjoying a breakout season as like really looking like a stud for this defense. And then he goes down, and I just feel like the Chiefs have a matchup advantage there, where they need to attack the short, intermediate, like, middle of the field against the linebackers, because I don't think you want to really test those corners so much. So I think if you can find the matchups to win with Travis Kelce, get Xavier Worthy there. Juju Smith-Schuster had a couple of big catches in the AFC Championship game. I wouldn't be shocked to see him out there and with another big catch or two in this game. I think it's going to be all about how Mahomes and Andy Reid try to attack the middle of the field and see if they can test the Eagles linebackers and their safeties.
I think too, and I want to get your prediction after I mention this, but I think the team, and this is a dumb thing, this is obvious, but the team that makes fewer mistakes is going to win this football game. And 2 years ago, when the Eagles played the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, they handed the Chiefs 7 points on the fumble return for a touchdown. I mean, hey, just take the 7 points when you get them, but there was that, and the Eagles gave up a long punt return on a blown punt coverage that set up one of the Chiefs' other scores. We saw the Eagles have been very opportunistic with getting turnovers, 5 turnovers in the last game against the Washington Commanders in the NFC Championship game. And the Eagles have not been turning the ball over. They had a slew of them in the first 4 weeks, and then I think Jalen Hurts has turned the ball over 3 times total since week 5. So they've done a remarkable job in the turnover game. I know the Chiefs have done the same thing. They just have to basically, the team that makes the fewest mistakes is going to win this football game here on Sunday afternoon. So as you're looking at this game, you're going for the three-peat, looking to make history. I mean, it's all on the line here. How do you see this one shaking out?
Well, I'm going to go with the Chiefs, but I totally agree with you. It's in a game where, like we already mentioned, I think possessions are going to be hard to come by offensively because of the way both of these teams want to operate. And I've seen this Eagles team literally say, we're fine with going on a 17-play drive where all we do is hand it off on every snap. Yep. It's going to be tough, and I think that's going to make the turnovers that much more important. And the Chiefs almost had a costly one in the AFC Championship game. It was just a fumbled handoff between Mahomes and Isaiah Pacheco that led to a Bills score when it was at a critical moment in the game where it felt like the Chiefs were ready to like kind of pounce and finally create some separation and take things over. And they have that turnover, and then it winds up being a back and forth contest the entire time. Like,
Yeah.
I think this is a game where I don't think you can afford to turn the football over once. And
Right.
one turnover could be critical for either team. But at the end of the day, I think the Chiefs' coaching and execution and the extra preparation time going into this game is everything that plays to the Chiefs' strengths. And we've just seen them show up in these moments and seemingly always overcome the circumstances that are put in front of them. And simply, like, outside of being a Chiefs fan, I just want to see history. And I think seeing 3 straight Super Bowls would be really cool. So I'm going to pick the Chiefs to win this one, but I still think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be another one like the last Super Bowl where it's like 34-31 or something like that, and it's really close coming down the stretch like late in the fourth quarter.
I agree it's going to be a high-scoring game, and so I think we are going to see some fireworks. I think we are going to see, I think you said it right, I think whoever wins the turnover battle wins this game on Sunday, and that's generally speaking how it works in the Super Bowl. Stephen Serda, host and producer of Foolish Club Media. They cover the Chiefs for the Fan First Sports Network. Stephen, thanks for joining me here on Eye on the Enemy. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, John.
All right, now one last thing before I give you my Super Bowl prediction here. Congratulations to the great Eric Allen, who finally is going to be inducted into the NFL Pro Football Hall of Fame. He's going to be one of 4 inductees. This time around, he will have his bust enshrined in Canton, Ohio. Eric Allen was one of the very best cornerbacks in the NFL during the late 1980s and throughout the early to mid 1990s. Had some unbelievable seasons, was a first-team All-Pro a couple of times, or I think one time, but second-team, third-team All-Pro numerous times during Buddy Ryan and Bud Carson's Eagles defenses that just dominated the league. He had, of course, that unbelievable run back in 1994 against the Jets, probably his signature play, but also in the Eagles' playoff win against the Saints in 1992, Eric Allen had a pick six that essentially sealed the deal, and so many more great moments outside of that. He absolutely is a Hall of Famer. Congratulations to Eric Allen. I wrote a piece for Bleeding Green Nation last year when he didn't get in. He didn't even make the finalists. And I wrote a piece for bleedinggreennation.com talking about how deserving he was. You can go on my X timeline. It's there. I just bumped it on Thursday night, so you can check it out at John Stolnis on X. You can read what I wrote about Eric Allen and how deserving he was of the Hall of Fame. All right, let me give you my prediction for this game. I have been confident, and I think a lot of Eagles fans have been really confident heading into this game. I'm nervous. I certainly can envision a scenario. I can envision a world where Patrick Mahomes takes over, figures out a way through thievery, trickery, whatever may have you, through the football fates seem to just kiss the Chiefs every time they play a big game. Right? Against the Bills. They should have gotten that fourth down, that quarterback sneak call. It should have gone their way. The Bills should have been able to keep the drive moving, but instead it goes the Chiefs' way. Right? The Bills should have had Dalton Kincaid had that ball in his arms on that final heave by Josh Allen. He catches that ball. We're probably getting ready to take on the Bills on Sunday night, but instead the Chiefs. The Chiefs make enough plays. Patrick Mahomes does make enough plays to win these games, but it's a knife's edge every game. I don't know how they do it. They've won 9 straight playoff games. And all of them, just about all of them, not all of them, but I think 7 of the 9 have been by 1 score. How does that keep happening? Hey, look at the Super Bowl. I mentioned this when I was talking to Steven. The Super Bowl 2 years ago. The plays that benefited the Chiefs, Jalen Hurts just drops the football on the ground and they return it for a touchdown. As the Eagles they hold a 14-7 lead and they're driving. Right? They're past the 50-yard line. They're driving. Getting ready to take either a 17-7 or a 21-7 lead. Just dominating that game. And the whole script flips. And then the punt in the fourth quarter that gets returned down to the 6-yard line. These 2 plays that go against the Eagles, and the Chiefs get the defensive holding call on James Bradbury. Again, I still don't know how you throw that flag in that spot. The slippery field from 2 years ago is not going to be a factor here in Super Bowl 59. There were a lot of things that conspired against the Eagles. The Eagles made some mistakes too. I think Blaine Johnson said something interesting this week in that they didn't really come out after halftime well. And that is very much the case because the Chiefs outscored the Eagles. I think it was something like 28-11 in the second half of Super Bowl 57. And the Eagles said, Blaine Johnson said that they didn't come out sharp. They kind of choked in the second half because of the long halftime. They weren't ready for it. They didn't handle that well. So you figure they're going to handle things better this time around. They came out great. They came out playing great. The Eagles were ready for the moment. And that is one thing you can always say about a Nick Sirianni team. With the exception of last year's playoff game against the Buccaneers, this team does not have letdown games. They do not come out flat. Really, ever. They may have some things with the passing offense. It's out of sync. It's not working. All this different kind of stuff. Jalen Hurts may not be sharp. But the team comes out ready to play. This defense is better equipped to stop Patrick Mahomes than probably any defense he's played this year. And certainly better than the defense that the Eagles had 2 years ago with Jonathan Gannon, where if you didn't get home with your edge rushers, you could score on the Eagles defense. You could move the football on them. Now, Darius Slay and James Bradbury were very good 2 years ago, and CJ GJ was a good player too, but they didn't have the linebackers that they do now. They didn't have the ability to control the middle of the field. They didn't have Cooper DeJean in the middle of the field to help shut down Travis Kelce and the rest of the Chiefs offense. The Chiefs don't run the ball. I think this is a one-dimensional passing offense. Every indication, every football statistical indication leads you to believe that not only are the Eagles the better team, but that they've been playing better and that they are better prepared to win this football game. Every football metric tells you the Eagles should win this football game in a close game. These two teams are pretty evenly matched. But there's Patrick Mahomes on the other side. There is the magic of Patrick Mahomes. He finds a way. There's the magic of Andy Reid. Do you remember when Andy Reid couldn't win the big game? Do you remember when Andy Reid struggled with play calling in the big moments? When he made the bad decisions on what to do on fourth down? Do you remember that Andy Reid? Where did he go? Can we get him for just one more Sunday? As much as I love Andy Reid, where did that guy go? The guy who couldn't win the big game. Well, you have Patrick Mahomes. That helps a lot. Helps cover up for a lot of flaws. But Andy Reid's the best coach, maybe in NFL history. There's certainly, I think, the best offensive mind, the best offensive coach in NFL history. It's probably Bill Belichick 1, Andy Reid 2 in terms of overall coaching. And Belichick was more of a defensive mind than Andy Reid. Andy Reid's the best offensive mind we've seen as a head coach in NFL history. And he and Patrick Mahomes are a magical unit. But as great as the Patriots were during that run, they lost some Super Bowls. And it's insanely hard to win 3 Super Bowls in a row. It's of all of the things that have to bounce your way every single playoff game in order to continue to win the way the Chiefs have been winning for 3 years now. I'm not saying the Eagles are going to win because of the law of averages, but at some point, some of this stuff has to catch up to Kansas City, right? They can't keep getting every call right. You can't keep getting every bounce of the ball to head in your direction. So I think some of that turns around on Sunday. But I think at the end of the day, the Eagles have a superior matchup along both of the offensive and defensive lines. They have skill position guys everywhere. You have in Saquon Barkley a guy who, it seems, can't be stopped, running behind an offensive line that can't be stopped. You've got a defensive front that is getting better with each passing week here. You've got real linebackers. You've got real cornerbacks. You've got real safeties. You've got a team whose biggest weakness is their kicker, frankly. And this is a game that, on paper, the Eagles should win. I think the Eagles are going to win this game, and I think the Eagles are going to win this game rather comfortably, folks. I'm not predicting a 3-point win, a 6-point win. I'm not predicting that. I'm predicting a fairly comfortable win for this football team here on Sunday night. Maybe I'm irrationally confident. I probably am. But I think the Chiefs' run of getting every bounce winning every close call is over. I think I think the Eagles too. I think they have more to play for here, strangely. They've got to get over that. This is a legacy game for Jalen Hurts and for Nick Sirianni, and they've been getting disrespected by a lot of the national media here during the course of this playoff run. Don't think they don't know that. I saw the Chiefs also. I think they marketed or they trademarked three-peat, right? You don't think they don't know that. The Eagles don't know that too. The Eagles, I think, feel like the disrespected team. They have the chip on their shoulder to get past the point where they didn't get past last time. And if they don't win this thing, the questions are going to be asked about Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. Well, can they win the big one? Are they chokers in this spot? I don't think it's going to be fair, because to get to the Super Bowl is a ridiculously good accomplishment. But we're all going to be wondering, what's it going to take? Like, this is likely to be the best Eagles roster we're ever going to see. Now, we said that 2 years ago, too. And this Eagles window is wide open. This Eagles team should compete for a Super Bowl every year, but even if you're better next year, you may not get this far. We've seen great teams. All those legendary teams I just ran down, at a certain point, you get a little bad luck to fall your way, and you can't get back there. Aaron Rodgers never got back to a Super Bowl after winning the one that he won in his second year in the league, or third year in the league, whatever it was. He never got back. It's hard to do what the Eagles have done here, getting back to a Super Bowl. This is their chance. This is Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni's and Vic Fangio's chance to create a legacy for themselves, to win the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes has won 2 in a row. The Chiefs have won 3, 4 Super Bowls now, right? They want the three-peat. But is that as motivating a factor as the Eagles getting revenge for 2 years ago? Finishing the job, finishing what they started, completing the job, completing the deal. I think the Eagles are hungrier coming into this game as well. I think they're the better team. I think they're the more talented team overall. You may say Patrick Mahomes is the X factor, the better quarterback, and he is the better quarterback than Jalen Hurts, but Jalen Hurts is a great quarterback. And he played great in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, with the exception of the fumble. The Eagles I think they have more going for them in this game. And I think the Eagles are going to establish themselves in this game as the superior football team. I think the Eagles build up a little bit of a lead in this game. I think there's a late touchdown, which turns this thing into a more comfortable finish. Maybe the Chiefs score a touchdown, or score a touchdown late to make it look a little bit closer than it is. But my score is going to be a little bit different than a lot of the scores that you're going to hear. Eagles 35, Kansas City Chiefs 23. I think this defense is going to shut down Patrick Mahomes. I think this defense is going to do to Mahomes and the Chiefs largely what they did to the Commanders last week, or 2 weeks ago in the NFC Championship game. And this Eagles offense can and will score on the Kansas City defense. 5 touchdowns in this game for Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, and this Eagles offense. I don't think there's going to be a big moment at the end of the game that turns the tide. I think the Eagles win this game rather comfortably. Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni cement themselves as Eagles legends and deny the Kansas City Chiefs a chance at history. Folks, that is going to do it for this edition of Eye on the Enemy. Thank you all for being with me during the course of this year. I'm so glad we got to take this all the way to the Super Bowl and watch this team get here. We'll have another show for you next week to recap the Super Bowl, and then we'll see what happens after that. But I hope you enjoy the game. Try not to get too crazy. I will try to follow my own advice, and make sure that you're reading all of our content over at bleedinggreennation.com, and check out all the great podcasts we have for you here at the Fan First Sports Network and the Eagles Pin Pull Network. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time right here on Eye on the Enemy.